Well, morning everybody. You find me in a slightly unusual position. I'm lying in bed because I haven't slept for 3 days now due to pain in my back. But that's not the reason I'm coming to you and speaking to you now. We've just had the announcement from the Supreme Court regarding Brexit and the necessity for a parliamentary vote on any deal arranged by the Prime Minister before it can be enacted into law. And I wanted to mention just very briefly that this is about people power coming into effect twice now in the space of less than a year. A year ago, the battle lines were being drawn up by both sides to fight in the Brexit or Remain camps as to whether or not we would stay members of the European Union, part of that wider conclave that is Europe. And despite personal opinions in this House and many others, vote through referendum was made and a decision has been made, and we are leaving Europe. And this was the first sign of people power being enacted for, well, over 30 years, near as damn it, whereby instead of our parliamentary leaders being able to tell us what was best for us, we told them what we wanted as a nation. And as a nation, we got our way. And now it would appear that the Supreme Court has agreed that we must have our say again, albeit through our elected representatives in Westminster, on any deal made by the Prime Minister and the governing party, the Conservatives, before it is enacted into law and before we finally do leave the EU. Here's an example of the fifth of the principles of spiritualism in action, and that, of course, is the principle of personal responsibility. It's not exactly how I intended to start it, but it's as good a way as any, so let's just talk briefly about that. In our lives as human beings, as Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Homo africanus, all of them, we have historically and currently usually found somebody to blame for the problems in our lives. If we don't have enough money, it's our employer's fault, or it's the government's fault, or it's the taxation system, or it's the banker's fault. If we're not healthy enough, it's our doctor's fault. If our children aren't learning well enough, it's the teacher's fault. If public transport doesn't work well enough, it's the railway's fault, or the bus's fault, or the union's fault. Very rarely, and more so than ever in this 21st century, we look to find fault in other people. Yet, more than often, we're more than happy to take the prize for the good stuff. If good things happen, it's down to us. Bad things happen in our lives, it's down to somebody else. Well, the simple fact of the matter is, we are responsible for everything that happens in our lives. It's called karmic law. And spiritualism is somewhat different to the majority of faith structures and even cultural ideas and idioms, in as much as we very much believe in the principle that as you sow, so you reap. If we haven't got enough money in the bank, it's probably because we've spent too much. if our children aren't succeeding at school, then perhaps it's time, not always, but sometimes, perhaps it's time we started taking more of an interest in our children's education, as my parents took in my education, not just my academic achievement, but my personal achievements as a human being when I was a child growing up, because there was an influence to be gained there from my sociological engagement and involvement in the world, which was largely down to the actions of my parents as to who I interacted with, where I interacted at, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure there's many of you who can think the same. And there's many, many examples of where we have to take some of the responsibility for what happens in our lives. And I go back just briefly to that karmic thing. Within karma, there is the law of cause and effect. If we do good things happen to us. If we do bad things happen to us. And that's the simplest way of putting it. If we can accept that we have personal responsibility for our actions in our lives, then we can begin to live our lives more fully and more positively and more proactively as members of society, as members of a culture or a race or a faith. If we abstain ourselves from responsibility, then we have nobody to blame for ourselves when things don't go our way. The most obvious example of this is in the voting system. For those who moan now about the result of the referendum, or of referenda in general when they've happened, or general elections or local elections, well, the person I wanted didn't get elected, the party I wanted to get in didn't get in. Did you vote for them? No, couldn't be bothered. Apathy is one of the biggest killers when it comes to personal responsibility. We have to take a conscious and proactive decision to be involved in our society and in the community in which we live. We did that in a massive way last year in the EU referendum. And later on in the year, in another place, in another country, over the other side of the Atlantic, huge swathe of people did the same in the United States. Now, whether or not we accept that Mr. Trump is going to be a good a good president or not, waits to be seen. Whether President Assad can be changed from his way of thinking and doing positive things for the people of Syria instead of maintaining his regime of terror remains to be seen. Whether by our actions the society in which we live can be made a better place remains to be seen. If we start taking responsibility for our lives, for our actions, for the actions of those we have a direct influence in, be they our children or our relatives, then there is much that can be achieved. As a global community, we've done it a couple of times now. Two of the largest democratic communities in or on the planet have achieved that in the last 12 months. In political terms, what would happen if each and every one of us took the passions that were shown in both those debates and engaged them into our lives on a daily basis, on every decision or every action that had to be taken in our lives or the lives of those we are responsible for, i.e. our children? What a difference this world could be instead of abrogating responsibility to a third party, of finding somebody else to blame, if we started to say, well, actually, part of it's down to me, part of it's down to how I respond to the situation, how I respond to the challenge, do you not think that we could do some wonderful things in this world? So as I lie here sounding a bit sorry for myself, believe you me, I'm not. I'm just very, very overtired and in a great deal of pain. I am filled with a little thrill, a little tremor of excitement each day as I consider how my actions can directly, positively impact in my life, but also by those actions in the lives of people around me. How I can positively serve by accepting my responsibility for my involvement and my partake in life as part of society. And I hope you will too. So there you are. The last of my musings and proliferation, my consideration on the 7 principles of spiritualism, national spiritualism. And I hope that if you've liked it, that you'll do the usual underneath, that if you've liked it, you'll share it so that other people can hopefully be inspired to start to take responsibility. Just try it. Take responsibility for something simple in your life. Something as simple as, say, in the UK at the moment, which is very significant, deciding whether or not your health condition really needs your attendance at A&E, or whether you'd be better off going to your GP, or as John did yesterday for a dermatitic or skin condition, went to see the pharmacist and got advice that normally would be taken up by a doctor's or a nurse's consultation. See how by making that personal decision to take responsibility for your own situation, rather than, as I say, passing on the responsibility to a third party and then blaming them if something doesn't go the way you want it to, whereas if you had actually taken responsibility yourself, you could have got the outcome that was most appropriate to your needs and more acceptable to your way of thinking. Of just how much more positive a life you can begin to lead and live, and how very quickly that changes and becomes something good in your life. Whatever happens over the Article 50, this is now for British people, by the way, over the Article 50 triggering and the deal that Prime Minister May manages to negotiate with Secretary Davis and other members of the Cabinet and the European Union, be assured that we will have a say in it before it's implemented. The Supreme Court has just this minute guaranteed that. Make sure that, again, your voice is heard, because your voice is important. This is me with my political hat rather than my faith hat now. Your voice counts. Your voice and your peaceful response, protest if you like, can move mountains. And to the people of America, I say the same. If you're not happy with the person sat in the Oval Office, you can influence him. You may think that he's Teflon coated and that you won't be able to change anything. But look at the outpouring of the Women's March, the Women's Protest, the day after the inauguration. And whatever he says and his people say about people turning up for the inauguration numbers versus the people who marched, not just in Washington, but around the world the day after the inauguration. We saw the figures. I don't just mean the numeric figures, I mean human figures stood on the streets, stood on the National Mall in Washington, stood in Trafalgar Square or outside Grosvenor Square in London outside the American Embassy, marching in cities around the world, protesting at the inauguration and installation of a man the majority did not vote for. He's in place now, but that doesn't mean that you have no say in what he's going to do for the next 4 years, because, my American friends, just as happened when Rosa Parks moved to that seat on the bus, one person's positive actions can move mountains. Just as that student in Tiananmen Square back a few years now stood in front of the tanks and refused to move until laws were changed and the sovereignty of the people was begun to be recognised in China. He made changes that are still being felt across that communist state to this day. We in the UK can affect Brexit. You in America can affect the White House and the actions of your president in his incumbency. And we can all impact and impress upon our own personal sphere of existence by our involvement and by our authority brought about by our personal responsibility. Make your life count. Make it positive, make it worthwhile, and may your journey be as full of joy as it is of hope. Blessed be. God bless. Namaste. And do watch out, in a couple of weeks' time we will be launching our new magazine programme, News Shack. There may be a slight delay. Unfortunately, we've had some technical problems with our computer equipment brought about by damp. Not our problem, but something that we have had to take responsibility and ownership of to get resolved, and it's in the process of being done so because we would not give up. But it has meant that we may be slightly delayed in starting, so apologies if we are, but watch out for that. But as I say, if you've liked what you've heard, hit like, hit share, leave a comment, keep it clean please, subscribe if you haven't already, and until we see again, may your God go with you. May your perception of the divine be ever in your heart. And may peace, joy, love and empowerment surround, enfold and fill you. Until we meet again. Namaste.